There's a certain kind of person most sports fans can never fully understand. While millions of people scream at their televisions, celebrate strangers like family, and feel emotionally destroyed because their team lost a game, this person feels absolutely nothing. No excitement, no heartbreak, no obsession. And according to psychology, that indifference might reveal something surprisingly deep about how their brain works. Most people assume that if you don't care about sports, you must be boring, antisocial, or missing some essential human instinct. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Because not caring about sports doesn't mean you lack emotion or passion. It simply means your brain searches for meaning, excitement, and connection in completely different places. To understand this, we first need to understand why sports affect people so deeply in the first place. Human beings are tribal by nature. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on belonging to a group. Your tribe protected you, fed you, and gave you identity. And modern sports tap directly into that ancient wiring. A sports team becomes a modern tribe. The colors, chants, logos, rivalries, they trigger the same psychological instincts that once helped humans survive in dangerous environments. When a fan watches their team play, their brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals tied to pleasure, bonding, and emotional attachment. The brain starts treating the team like us. That's why people say, "We won," even though they never stepped onto the field. Emotionally, their identity becomes attached to the outcome of the game. But people who don't care about sports often process identity differently. Psychologists describe them as less tribally driven. Their sense of self usually comes more from individuality than group belonging. They don't need a team, a crowd, or a shared rivalry to feel complete. And because of that, the emotional highs and lows of sports simply don't activate their brain in the same way. What's fascinating is that sports fandom behaves almost like a controlled addiction. Every game is built on uncertainty. Will the team win, lose, make a comeback? That unpredictability constantly feeds dopamine into the brain. Neuroscientists call this intermittent reinforcement, one of the most addictive psychological reward systems known to humans. It's the same mechanism used in gambling, casinos, and slot machines. The uncertainty keeps people emotionally hooked. But for someone who doesn't care about sports, that dopamine loop never fully activates. Their brain simply doesn't interpret spectator competition as emotionally rewarding. And some researchers believe this difference may partly come from genetics. Certain dopamine receptor patterns appear linked to how strongly people respond to competitive entertainment. In other words, your complete indifference to sports may literally be wired into your biology, but the difference goes deeper than dopamine. Sports fans often experience something called basking in reflected glory. When their team succeeds, they feel successful too. The victory becomes personal. It temporarily boosts confidence, pride, and belonging. But people who don't obsess over sports usually build self-worth differently. Their identity feels less dependent on external victories they can't control. They don't emotionally rise and collapse based on the performance of strangers. And contrary to popular belief, many non-sports people are not emotionless at all. They simply invest their emotional energy somewhere else. Some become deeply absorbed in music, art, psychology, philosophy, business, creativity, relationships, or personal growth. Their emotional intensity still exists. It's just directed inward rather than towards spectator entertainment. Studies have even shown that people with low interest in sports often score higher in openness to experience. They tend to seek stimulation through ideas, imagination, beauty, and intellectual exploration rather than competition and group identity. While one person gets emotional watching a championship game, another might feel the exact same emotional intensity listening to music alone at night or discovering an idea that changes how they see life. And for some people, not caring about sports comes from experience. Maybe they grew up feeling excluded from sports culture. Maybe competition always felt aggressive instead of exciting. Maybe they never understood why adults become emotionally overwhelmed over games that don't affect their actual lives. Sometimes indifference is psychological preference. Other times it's emotional distance built over years. The real divide between sports fans and non-sports people comes down to meaning. Sports fans often find meaning in unpredictable narratives, the comeback story, the rivalry, the underdog victory, the championship run. To them, sports are real-life storytelling filled with emotion and uncertainty. But non-sports people often seek meaning somewhere more personal. They prefer direct experiences over spectator experiences. Instead of watching someone else chase victory, they want to build something themselves. They'd rather create the story than observe it. Their emotional investment usually goes into things where their own actions actually shape the outcome. And maybe that's why many people who don't care about sports often appear quieter, more introspective, or more mentally detached from the crowd. Their brain simply isn't constantly pulled into collective emotional waves. They experience life differently, not better, not worse, just differently. So the next time someone asks, "Did you watch the game?" and you honestly couldn't care less, remember this: you are not broken, you are not boring. Your mind is simply wired toward different forms of meaning, excitement, and connection. While others lose themselves in teams, crowds, and rivalries, you may be searching for something more personal, more internal, and perhaps more real. Because in the end, every human being wants the same thing: purpose, emotion, belonging, and meaning. Some people find it in stadiums filled with noise, others find it quietly inside their own mind.